Anybody can be angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not in everybody's power and that is not easy. These lines by political thinker Aristotle has direct correlation with our today's session. Hello everyone. I'm Abhinav Keshi on behalf of the National Youth Community. Today, in this brand new session of NYC, we'll talk about anger management and emotional literacy, the two important terms which define and impact of physical, mental, and social well-being. We'll try to clarify the actual meaning of both the terms, which are generally associated with other psychological phenomena. What are the factors which result in causing anger, and the ways in which we can deal with this and attain emotional intelligence. To talk more on this, we have Ms. Debjani Roy, ma'am, who is an industry stalwart and domain expert in the field of human resource with over 25-year hardcore working experience across several companies such as Nalco, Bharti, HCL Tech, Bentley Systems, etc. Been awarded many times among the country's most dynamic HR managers. She has lately branched out of her own and chosen the advisory and mentor role going forward. Currently, besides being the chief HR advisor to Mindview Fleet, which is a reputed software startup in the transportation space, she also runs her own HR solutions and advisory firm named Wind Beneath the Wings Venture. We welcome you, ma'am, in our session.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhinav.
Moving forward, my first question to you, ma'am, is, ma'am, often both the terms are associated or used replaceably with other psychological terms such as empathy, intelligent quotient, cognitive development, and mental illness. We would like to know from you, and we would like you to decode the meaning of both these terms, anger management and emotional literacy, for our audience for better understanding.
Yes, Abhinav, I think you're absolutely right when you say that, we have been guilty of having used the terms interchangeably, which unfortunately, had it been a real English speaking nation where these terms would have been, seamless to everyone, probably we could have expected everyone to understand them at the same way. But nonetheless, what's happened is there are subtle differences in the terms. And by virtue of the fact that all these topics have suddenly come to the forefront because of multiple reasons, and suddenly there's a plethora of terminology which is doing the rounds, it is confusing. It is not just confusing alone, it actually puts people off, because when people are not able to relate well with terms, it becomes jargon, and not everybody takes to jargon very well. So if you remember, once upon a time, even management language and management education was considered to be a whole lot of jargon, till such time that many of us, the fraternity itself came forward and demystified a lot of those jargons to make sense out of it. So one of the things which we practitioners have always maintained and always thought best for the audience is, please keep things simple. The simpler the definitions are, the simpler the meanings are, the better it is that you'll understand. And the faster you understand, the better it is that you'll own up to it. Because the whole idea of these sessions, of having these, interactive sessions and having these wonderful topics to be discussed, is not because I need to showcase my knowledge alone or you need to put me up on a platform, but more importantly, there needs to be the audience who needs to understand what really does anger management mean, from a perspective of where is the relevance of anger management in today's life. It cannot just be a term, but it has to be relevant to the way we live our lives today. Similarly, when we talk about emotional literacy or emotional intelligence, multiple number of coinage of such terms, despite the fact that they are very close to each other and probably have overlaps, we still need to understand where the subtle differences lie. So my effort and my intent in this particular session would be exactly what you have outlined, which is to try and make things a little more simpler and give the causes, mention the remedies, and probably put a few important facts before everyone, so that tomorrow when people talk about these particular terms and people talk about these ideologies, we are not left on the fringe, but we are able to understand what exactly we mean by talking about these issues.
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, moreover, if we see that if we just look at the terms of anger management and emotional literacy, if we demarcate the terms distinct differently, then it's the exact term is well beyond its meaning.
Yes.
Sorry, I made a mistake. Yeah, the meaning is well beyond its term. Like it involves emotions, it involves multiple of things, as you said that it consists of plethora of things. So ma'am, we'd
Yes.
like you to we hope that this session goes in that direction only, that we have to simplify all these terms so that our audience can get a knack of it.
Sure. So, as I said, that's exactly my intent. Having said that, Abhinav, it is too small. A 1 hour session or a 50-minute session is actually too small to possibly take on each one of
True,
those
ma'am.
different terms. So, today, while I talk about anger management, I cannot really go to the back end of anger management and talk about anxiety disorders or cognitive disconnects, because those are large terms by themselves, and it's going to create more more confusion amongst
Completely, yes.
the audience. So I'm going to stick to anger management, talk about it, what is the relevance today in our day to day life, how does it come about, and what are the genesis of these kind of anger terms that we are talking about, and how can we look at it from a prescriptive perspective, where we may need to go in for some real remedy in order to undo those damages. And there are some day to day simple things that we ourselves can do in order to take charge of when anger starts surfacing. So I'll try and keep it, as simple as that. And going over to emotional literacy, I'll try and tie it together, that, when you talk about anger management, if you were a little more sensitive and probably sensitized towards emotional literacy and emotional intelligence, then there is a very natural way in which you can also keep curb on anger. So I'm just going to try and put the correlation between the two, so that we can stick to the topic for today. And if there are any other queries and any other confusions about other terminologies, we can possibly take them on in later sessions if we have them. So
Perfect.
can I go ahead with my presentation now?
Yes ma'am, yes ma'am, you can surely.
Okay. Okay, because this is despite everything said and done, it's a slightly technical topic, and you can't
True,
just, keep talking, because then there is a probability that people might sort of drop the link somewhere. So I've put
ma'am.
a few slides together, not too much text, but I hope it is going to be easy for people to actually relate to. So give me a
Okay.
minute. I'm just going to go into share screen and okay. So is it visible to everybody?
Yes ma'am.
Okay, so let's start with understanding what is this whole phenomenon of anger all about. How does it happen to us? So, in simple terms, anger is nothing but frequently it is a resultant of frustrations. So, when we are unable to get to something, when our wishes are not fulfilled, and we say what is very commonly called frustration, basically the anger starts simmering from there. Or if our feelings are blocked or thwarted from something the subject feels is important, then anger starts surfacing. So you may be wanting to go out of home today, wanting to go and actually buy your favorite, being a child, I want to go out and have my favorite brand of ice cream, my favorite flavor of ice cream. And that's a feeling which is very strong to me at that point of time. And it is important, you see, for a child, having going out and having an ice cream of choice is a very important subject, though we adults sometimes don't realize how important it could be, because we all operate from our own positions of ego states, as a result of which we thwart it down, we block the child from doing what she or he wants to do. And that is where the child's irritation comes in the forefront, and anger suddenly takes a no more than important stage at that point of time. Anger can also be very clearly a defensive response to underlying fear or feelings of vulnerability or powerlessness. I'm sure a lot of you, my audience, my friends out there, you've heard about this very common kind of a saying that, offense is the best defense. Now, where has this particular metaphor come from? This has come from exactly what this particular sentence attempts to sort of bring to you, which is when I'm powerless, when I feel there is helplessness on my side and there is a vulnerability which is sitting with me, that's the time when I don't want to project that to the outside world. And that is when I actually put up a wall, put up a defense mechanism around me. And that defense mechanism, because it is not natural to my nature, that is the reason why I remain irritated. There is always an anxiety, there is always an edginess which is there to my nature at that point of time, which very often topples into what can actually get manifest as anger. So whether it's an output of frustration, whether it is something which comes from being denied of a feeling or an emotion which is important to you at that point of time, or whether it is a defense mechanism, these are typically the locus of, the stimuli which brings about anger to the forefront. So what is anger management, therefore? If anger are these different kinds of, resultant feelings that we just talked about, what is anger management? It is nothing but a psychotherapeutic program for anger prevention and control. So this is a simple definition. Okay, I don't want to move away from this definition, though we will not make it as scientific as this, because at the end of the day, anger management is absolutely a science today. It is not something which took place at homes. It is not something which, one fine morning any one of us got up and said, "Oh, I have just come across anger management." It was a science which was put in place by a lot of scientists and a lot of counselors and coaches and clinical psychologists, who put together this very, very important lifestyle kind of a program, which basically was aimed towards curbing anger as and when it came to the forefront. So, anger management programs were meant to consider anger to be a motivation caused by an identifiable reason. So, when we talk about anger management, it is very specific that this is not something which is out in the realm of imagination. It is a reality. It is an identifiable reason. So whether it is a frustration because of something not happening, or my feelings being blocked because of someone not giving into those feelings, or a sense of helplessness, these are actually identifiable reasons. And these reasons become the motivation for anger to surface. These can be logically analyzed. So, any of these feelings or any of these emotions are there with us. These are logical manifestation of our feelings at any point of time, and hence can be put through tests in order to come to certain hypotheses. And finally, it suitably worked towards, means anger management programs, when they work towards these feelings, they actually come towards certain conclusions, and that makes these kind of programs that much more effective. If it was something which could not have been explained, or if it could not have been logically analyzed, and nobody could have put a finger on it, then probably we would not have had these kind of programs coming in place today, because it is difficult to actually to put a program or to handle something which cannot actually be felt or sensed, or at the best being empathetically understood from the other side. I've used the word empathy very consciously right now, because as and when we move towards the latter part of the program, you will please realize that empathy ultimately plays a very, very large part, not only in curing anger, handling anger, controlling anger, but also a very, very intrinsic, or being an intrinsic part of the latter part of our program, which is emotional literacy. So, therefore, the
Ma'am,
ideal goal of anger. Sorry?
would like to interrupt you in between by asking a simple question regarding to your previous slide. Like, ma'am, you said
Yeah,
that non-fulfillment of expectations result in frustration, and which
yeah,
over a period of time that frustration leads to the development of anger.
sure.
And in this particular slide, the next slide, you said that what is in the anger management part, that we have that the it is a psychotherapeutic, yeah, to scientific method in order to manage or control our anger. So, ma'am, my question to you here is like, can we not uh, lessen our expectation, or can we not curb ourselves at the previous two stages of non-fulfillment of expectations or frustrations, so that the anger cannot be developed or something like that? Can we
I will
stop
come to
ourselves?
that. I will
Okay.
come to that. I would just request that you stay with me for a couple of more slides, because
Okay.
I wanted to start off with the actual understanding of anger management, but then I will go on to let you understand that we don't need to make a big thing out of it at all
Hmm.
points of time. Not everybody who undergoes pangs of anger, or not every fulfillment of desire not taking place, needs to go through therapy. It can sometimes be very well curbed even within the control of that person's locus of
Okay.
control itself. So if you stay with me as I move along, I will actually show you the correlation between stress and anger being a part of the same, two sides of the same coin, and
Okay.
sometimes interchangeably, because we undergo tremendous amount of stress which also builds up our anger. There are mechanisms available to us which are stress management mechanisms, which are very easily practiced, which also helps ultimately in anger management. So you don't always have to move to psychotherapeutic programs. There are
Hmm.
ways in which you can handle it even before.
Yes.
Can I move forward?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay, so the ideal goal of anger management, therefore, is to control and regulate anger so that it does not result in problems. I'd like to draw your attention. This is one aspect of it. Not anywhere in any of my presentation slides would you see that the goal of anger management is being stated as completely disseminating it, or completely, completely finishing off with anger as a natural phenomena, because that is not possible. Just like there is fear, just like there is humor, there is laughter, there is pain, there are all the different kinds of emotions that we go through.
Emotions.
Anger is also a very important and natural emotion that every one of us at some point of time or the other goes through. So the idea is not to say that we lead a life where we can do away with anger completely. It's a question of how well can we control and regulate anger so that it does not become a part of a problem statement in our lives. So that is
Hmm.
something which we need to keep in mind, because I often come across, when I counsel a lot of people in anger management, a lot of people say that, can you please help me do away with it? No, there is nothing called do away with it. Can we do away with success? Can we do away with failures? The answer is the
No.
same. Just like you will enjoy success at one time, you will probably also suffer failure, because they are again two sides of the same coin. Similarly, if you like to have joy and happiness in life, there will be times when possibly the pain and the frustration will probably lead to anger at some point of time or the other. And it's a natural index, and we've got to live with it. Taking you to the next slide again, it's important to know about anger that anger is an active emotion. That's exactly what I was trying to explain just now. That it's an active emotion. It's not something that you can either do away with, or it can peak at any point of time. It calls a person feeling it to respond, which means that at any point of time, an individual may be given to certain circumstances whereby things happen in a certain manner, where anger becomes an active emotion in response to what that person is feeling at that point of time. So it's actually a natural stimuli which becomes a response to something that a person may feel from time to time. So it's called an active emotion. Why do people get into anger issues? And this is important to understand. And this probably is part of what Abhinav, you posed a question right away, that do we make too much out of anger? That, we go to at the length of saying that anger management is everything that needs to be done? Probably not, because if you
No.
look at some of the things which leads to anger issues, they are commonplace issues. They happen to us every now and then, more sometimes at the workplace, sometimes at home, sometimes out in a social syndrome. They are everywhere, and you can't predict, and you can't sort of completely say when it's going to hit you. But some of the things that we need to understand as to why people get into anger issues is because both the instigator and the instigated lack interpersonal and social skills to maintain self control. So, one of the things that we need to understand is, in a situation, sometimes when there is anger which surfaces in a social situation, and there are more than one parties which are involved in it, it is important to understand that we allow those anger issues to surface, and it becomes a major point of contention between more than one people, because neither the person who started it nor the person who became party to it actually are well skilled and have the competence to be able to maintain and bring about self control over their emotions. If you see many a times in a social situation, there are people who get excited and upset very fast. And you'll be, it's a sorry thing to say, but I have at least observed in a lot of social situations that when people identify others as some others, maybe one person or two people, as people who get angry very quickly or become, start brooding about things very fast, they become soft targets. I've found many people preying on those people, which is such a sad commentary of the way our own behaviors are demonstrated in such social situations. Quite contrary to that, you'll again find that there are people who hold their self control so well in every situation that very few people actually manage to rub them the wrong way. And they also earn a lot of nicknames for themselves. There are people in social situations who are known to be, the others will talk about them and say, oh, let's not roughen that guy. Nothing really, hits his countenance, which means that that person has the competence to be able to control his own emotions to that extent that he doesn't easily fall prey to somebody's provocation, because that is something which can come to you and hit you at any point of time. So these are things which are important to keep in mind when we talk about why do anger issues actually happen. Secondly, negative emotional states often impairs impulse control. Now, if by nature I have negativity in me, which is in my emotional state, I am more often than not given to talk about things in a more a brooding, a negative, a dark way, then it always sort of, pulls down my confidence to such an extent that it impairs my impulse control. What is impulse control? Impulse control is your ability to primarily control on impulse anything that is happening to you which is contrary to your expectation. So supposing I'm quite happy and I'm standing and having a drink at a party, and suddenly a stray comment comes my way. A very stray comment comes my way. If I'm a confident human being, I would be able to overlook that comment, maybe even look at the person who passed that comment and give a very sly smile from the side of my face. And that is called impulse control, which is my ability to think on the spot and give a response which does not allow me to actually break down at that point of time. But assume that I was less of a confident person and I'm filled with negative thoughts at that point of time, and I'm continuously debating within myself as to what are people around me thinking at this time. Am I dressed well? Oh, am I fitting in well? Am I doing the right thing? Am I holding the glass right? Then anytime a negative comment comes your way, and probably about the dress and the glass itself, you can imagine what it can do to my nervous state at that time. And that's where your impulse control completely goes out of sync. So whenever such things happen, your negativity leads to what are known as anger issues.
Ma'am,
Third, not
don't you think that the intensity of the provocation also leads to impulse losing of impulse one's own impulse? The
absolutely, I
intent.
agree with you. The extent and degree of provocation does have a role to play. The same way, Abhinav, the negativity of my emotional state will also have a role to play. I may have a soft emotional state, but I may not be negative. In which case, even if the provocation is not that high, I'll still be able to maintain my countenance. But imagine an emotional state where I'm soft, but I'm also extremely negative and I'm filled with self doubt. There, the provocation does not have to be too strong. Even a small little comment or just a little peek, would be able to scratch my surface. That's what I meant where where I tried to explain that your impulse control ultimately is your defining moment, where depending on the state of your emotion at that time, and as rightly pointed out to you, maybe the provocation coming your way, the degree of it, as well as let's look at other factors, the kind of seamless comfort that you have with the crowd around you. Sometimes you are made to attend areas or attend parties or attend gatherings where you're not very comfortable because you're not very close to the people, but your presence has been required and asked for. But in other cases where you are in a comfort zone and you have people whom you feel you are in a safe haven, even if you're in a negative state, even if there are things going wrong, you'll still feel a little more confident about holding your own. So there are multiple factors which are at use. But here I've tried to only point to those which are important, which are crucial, and which ultimately have the inflection point of moving towards the anger issues. So, the third point, not turning a blind eye of forgiveness, is a tool to keep the anger burning. So, many a times you'll hear that, one is told, maaf kar do. Just forgive this guy, or just don't bother. I mean, that he's too menial. He makes it a habit of doing this. Why would you just, I mean, get? Why would you allow that person to get under your skin? Please make sure that you're able to turn a blind eye to this guy. Now, if I knew that this was really a good piece of advice, I would probably take it on, and I would probably want to cultivate it as something which can help me in further situations. But many people are not able to do it. So when they are not able to ignore even the slightest bit of any kind of provocation coming their way, that keeps their anger burning, because it keeps seething, it keeps brooding inside them. It's not something which comes out in a flash, but it keeps building like sediment after sediment. The other things is basically more physical, but it's important to know that not getting enough sleep, exercise, and good diet are reasons which definitely aggravate the propensity for you to actually get to the anger point very fast. It is often told that, why do we today talk about yoga, medication, wellness exercises? Why do we talk about chakra exercises? These are nothing but self-developed and cultivated ways of bringing about mental peace, which ultimately allows us proper sleep, proper exercise, proper diets. It helps us to lead our life in the right direction, because we are living life in a fast lane. Most of us are. We are in a very tough world out there. The current pandemic, and I'm sure many other things, are just creating more and more borders and boundaries and windows and doors where already there were enough problems which were happening. Now, with that kind of situation around, it's very important that we maintain the right physicality, because without that, even the basic control that we need to keep on our the checks and balances that we need to keep on our emotions, I mean, will actually fail at the prime time. So these are some of the issues which are important to keep in mind to understand that why do people get into anger issues. Some of them are within ourselves, like the physicality or the ability to turn a blind eye. Now, these are things which are very much intrinsic to oneself, but there are issues which are outside our locus of control. So if there are instigators, and if there are external people as well as external circumstances which are presenting a very different picture to what you would expect, and is a provocative and is negative and is dark for you, then often enough it can lead you to situations where your anger surfaces. So these are some of the issues which can be outside or inside, but we need to keep track of them to understand how anger surfaces. Now, this is a very important, subject that I've come across, because we've studied so much on this. This is actually part of my PhD thesis, and I'm happy to say that it's very, very interesting when you actually have interchangeable issues, because they present you with a very different light than what you would have thought otherwise. So, are stress and anger issues interchangeable? Now, anxiety and stress are treated by what are known as CBTs, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which, however, was also an integral part of the later evolved classical psychotherapy based anger management interventions that had originated in the 1970s. So if you just see this statement by itself, you realize that the background therapy for both anxiety and stress, as well as anger, actually rooted themselves around the same kind of design, the same kind of philosophy, and the same kind of psychotherapy. Only the timings were different, the ages were different, and probably the interventions themselves were slightly different. But the reality was that both were coming from the same background, their stimuli was similar, and stress and anger were therefore considered to be sufficiently similar because both were caused by external stimuli. Most of the time, both stress and anger sat in you not as a natural phenomena, but as something which was a victim or an output of things happening outside your control. They were also mediated by internal processing. So once that external happening happened, So if there was something which happened which was an external stimuli, it then became a lot of yourself, and you started internally processing that as part of your mental process. So if there was a person who passed, to make things simple, if there was a person who actually passed a very wrong comment or a very snide remark on probably the way I dressed at a certain occasion, if I was a confident, and if I was a human being who, made very little of these things and carried myself with great equanimity, I would make mincemeat of it, and I would probably even overlook it and not even bother to think about it. But majority of us would probably internalize it. We will take it home with us. We will keep processing it internally until such time that it became a part of our brain process, and thereby ultimately it became part of a semi theory which even we would start thinking of. So many doubts and so many proclamations started coming out from those kind of half theories which we give rise to because of internal processing of such external stimuli. Stress and anger are also considered to be sufficiently similar because they are both expressed in either adaptive or maladaptive forms. So, if you look at both stress and anger, they can be relative. They can actually be medium. They can actually be normal. It is not something that we wish away. There is a certain amount of stress which will always be there in our lives. There is a certain amount of anger which is an active emotion, as we just looked at, and therefore they are adaptive. They are things which are part of our lives, and we need to adapt to those as well as possible. But when does it become maladaptive? When it crosses the boundaries, when it actually becomes too much for the countenance or the mental countenance of the person to take on. And because both stress and anger have similar propositions to actually be both adaptive and maladaptive, therefore we find that they are kind of similar. Now, what therefore are considered to be causes of persistent anger? And there are different reasons why there are persistent angers. Now, these are causes, and we're talking of factorization here. You may understand that there can be reasons for those factors, but we are not delving into reasons. When we talk about medical factors, what can be an immediate spark to persistent anger? Please understand that term, because anger management becomes relevant only when there is persistent anger, only when there is cause of continuous anger, and in a way which is actually harming everything around itself. That is when we become a party to undergoing something called an anger management program. So when we look at medical factors, we look at drug addiction, we look at alcoholism. Now, there could be a number of reasons as to why somebody could be a drug addict. We are not getting into that particular area because that's a different ballgame, that's a different topic altogether. We are not looking at lifestyles which leads you to adapting these, moving towards these medical factors, but we are looking at these factors as standalone, which actually give rise to persistent anger. So, drug addiction, alcoholism, mental disability, biochemical changes, PTSD, low esteem and confidence. Low esteem and confidence, unfortunately, is a real bane, because at the end of the day, drug addiction, alcoholism, mental disability, these are issues that have symptoms that can easily be factorized. These can easily be taken over, and they probably have enough situations of rehab and stuff today which can take care of these issues. But low esteem and confidence is something which is so intrinsic to a human being that if I try not to project it, I can do a good job of actually covering up. And that's when I build up walls around me, and anger becomes actually a very good offense system for me. So low esteem and confidence is a very, very dicey and dangerous thing to be in. And my suggestion to all those out there who probably even have an iota of going through these pangs at times, I would suggest that do not stop talking about it to the right people. If you do suffer from pangs of low esteem and confidence, if it does create pain within you, if it does create anxiety within you, one thing will lead to another. It'll start moving towards general anxiety disorders, it'll lead to depressions after that, it'll go towards mental illness, and then finally you will come to a spot where there is not going to be any going back. Before you actually hit those stages, it is better that even at the starting point where you realize that you're not able to fight the world on your own, and there are issues within your nature which doesn't allow you to actually move with that strength that is required, please look out for people, whether it's a coach, whether it's a friend, whether it's a well-wisher, and confide, because there can be a good enough suggestion coming from that side which is going to help you overcome that. Prolonged or intense anger and frustration leading to headaches, digestive problems, high blood pressure, and heart ailments. So you see, a lot of these are cause and effect related. So while we are looking at these issues as causing persistent anger, we are also seeing that it is also that persistent anger which finally also leads to more and more problems. And these are more physical problems than we ever think. And when we have continuous headaches and digestive problems, even when we have a good night's sleep, we are getting back in the morning fatigued, and it's almost as if I didn't have a sleep at all. You must understand that there is so much of stress and probably deep seated anger or resistance. You see, anger is not a word in isolation. Anger can be broken down to resistance. Anger can be, broken down to dissatisfaction. There are multiple these adjectives which actually all add up to your one single endpoint called anger. The brooding mechanism, the seething mechanism which goes through your body and your metabolism at all points of time actually go through these different processes before you identify it as, oh, I'm angry, I'm upset. Okay. Psychological disorders like GAD, which is general anxiety disorders, and depression, and finally migraines. You see, the migraines don't come on their own. It's not as if migraines are unlike a lot of belief. Migraines are not hereditary. It's not as if the migraine just has to come because of some genetical disorder or something that had to happen with a purely medical cause. Sometimes migraines come because of extreme stress coupled with your inability to fight the situation around yourself. So these are some of the causes of persistent anger on the medical front. Now let's look at what others are there. There are psychological and social causes. When we look at psychological and social causes, there's stress, there's again alcoholism, there's abuse. I'm sorry I haven't put it there. Poor social and familial problems, and extreme poverty. Because each one of them it's like all entwined together into a vicious cycle. When you have alcoholism and you have extreme poverty in a family, you often have abuse. That abuse can be substance abuse, the abuse can be physical abuse, the abuse can be mental abuse. That is what leads to poor social and familial problems. They look at themselves as it's a dark world out there. We don't realize how badly they are affected. They are unable to come out of those traps, and we land up with generations and generations of persistently angry individuals who carry on life like it's a burden that they are actually pulling along. So this is an extreme situation which is there. If you just were to look at, outside the fancy homes that we live in, outside the lovely cars that we drive, outside the good offices that we work in, we will find the little shanties and the little beehives of people sleeping on the streets, nowhere to go, the migrant workers, and all of them, the poor children begging in the street corners and in the social the signals. And you look at their faces, they are all a picture of exactly these social and psychological causes. Another last point of persistent anger which can erupt is because of trauma. And this trauma can be physical, the trauma can be mental. It can arise in such a manner that it affects actually the major parts of your cranial nerves, resulting in continuous drop in your ability to take control of your senses, as a result of which finally it leads to a complete dissatisfaction and disapproval of life, where otherwise it moves into again that realm of seething, brooding, and ultimately despair, where you start becoming angry and upset at the fact as to why am I living. So there are different ways of defining how persistent anger can make a home within yourself. And these are some of the causes which are easily identifiable. And for this particular presentation, I wanted to keep it simple and not move into the more deeper problems. And these were some of the easily picked factors which I thought could make sense to all of us. Signs that anger therefore needs controlling. So now we know, where does anger come from, How do you recognize what could be the causes? But there are signs which starts telling you, and this is again, I go back to what Abhinav said, that does it always have to be at that end, at that extreme, that we have to go for anger management programs? Or are there interim signs which starts telling us that let's start doing something about it, even within ourselves, so that it doesn't go to that extent? Now, these are some of the signs that that tells us that possibly that anger level which has been within me, which has been a part of myself, needs controlling today, which is regularly feeling that you have to hold in your anger. So there's a continuous dilemma, and there's a continuous fight happening within you about whether to curb the anger or not. Persistent negative thinking and focusing on negative experiences, constant feelings of irritation, impatience, and hostility, frequent arguments with others that escalate frustrations. You would come across some of your colleagues at the workplace. I have definitely come across many in my 25 years career where, I found that some people are very comfortable picking fights. Um, Even if it's a fresh morning, it's a bright morning, and you're all having a cup of coffee before you actually hit work in the cafeteria. There's one person, or there are two of them maybe, who will come in and who will start a thread of conversation, which A was completely out of place, B had nothing to do with the entire ambience at that point of time, C went contradictory to the mood of that entire gathering. And that often tells you that this is a person where the frustrations or the broodings internally have reached a point where he or she is unable to contain that within the self. Therefore, it often takes the shape of an external manifestation, and therefore results in these kind of frequent arguments. Sorry. Then there's physical violence, such as hitting your partner or children or starting fights, threats of violence against people or property, the road rage case, especially where there is a violence, and there is, in certain cities of our country, we even have people drawing arms and weapons out over a small thing, as overtaking from a wrong side. Okay, we have threats of violence against people or property under those circumstances, which always tells you that there's definitely something going wrong somewhere. Out of control or frightening behavior, such as breaking things or driving recklessly. So here we talk about driving recklessly, which is frightening behavior. The earlier we talked about threat of violence against people or property, where we talked about the road rage cases. But many a times, this entire bravado that we see on the part of certain people when they're driving recklessly, or while driving, they're sticking themselves out. Some of their friends are sticking themselves out from the side windows, throwing their arms around as if, I mean, there was nobody else and there was nothing happening on the streets. It's an absolutely scary thing to even behold. But these are things which comes out of your not being able to control your locus, not being able to control your emotions, and something that might have continuously gone wrong, you are pushing it out of your system and trying to dissolve that by giving into these kind of reckless behaviors. Avoiding situations because of anxiety or depression about anger outbursts. So this is another very, very common phenomena that we get to see at home, we get to see at the workplace, and we get to see all around, whether it's a movie hall, whether it's, a mall or a public place, and what have you. Signs that then become symptoms of severe anger. So we saw signs that anger needs controlling, but then those signs then started becoming symptoms. Okay, and those symptoms ultimately resulted in poor sleep, feeling on edge. So you have people whom you can see for yourself and see that they are very, very irritable, or they are not able to sit in one place very easily, or even when they are sitting in one place, they start a conversation even when nobody is paying attention to them, or they are fidgeting with something in hand, or they are making some kind of a noise. Something or the other is continuously happening to them. Their physicality, their internal anatomics, as well as their mental makeup, all tells you together that this person is definitely sitting on an edge. There's something terribly going wrong somewhere. Most often than not, it would be situations where the person would not have been able to counter what was happening to him, and therefore there would be a seething, a brooding anger somewhere sitting, which would have made a nest, or a home inside him. Getting irritated easily, becoming frustrated and irritated in minor situations, extreme suspicion. So, you're walking around, you have nothing to feel bad about, but then suddenly you start reading things. And those things may not have any vocation or any value whatsoever, but to your eye, it assumes supreme importance. Criticizing, hurting the other people, that is again something which often enough is a resultant of your not being able to be in control of your senses and your especially anger. Now, learning to seek treatment for self. Now, this is where I think we are now moving into an area where what then happens when we realize that yes, we have a perennial case of extreme anger sitting within us. There are cases where I'm not able to help either in the outside world or in my personal time, even in my private domain. There's always this nervous energy and this absolutely reckless behaviors and these not expected kind of stimuli which is continuously being manifest. I need to therefore seek treatment for self. If that realization comes to us, then half the battle is already won. Because many times we shun that knowledge. We don't want to accept it. We don't want to own it up. More because of the fact that either A, we feel that oh, we're superior enough not to fall a victim to something like that, or second, we are absolutely scared and uneasy about facing a reality where people start looking at you as somebody who's really not very normal, because in our society we are very quick to stereotype as well as brand somebody not normal the moment we are able to actually look into some kind of a aberration in their careers, notwithstanding the fact that probably each one of us has something or the other like that sitting within us. We fail to think of it that way. So we need to, once we realize and we own up to the fact that yes, there is something going wrong and my anger index is not under my control, then we need to start learning to seek treatment for self. Learning behavioral skills is an essential part of anger management. Now, this is a statement by itself. And again, as I had said right at the start of the session, there are a number of things which we might need to talk about as part of anger management, but we will not be able to cover those because of the paucity of time and the breadth of those and the dynamics of those other sections. Now, behavioral skills or behavioral competence are basically soft skills that are learned through pedagogies and through methodologies, which becomes ultimately a practicing habit within many of us. And there are certain training programs and certain behavioral interventions which are basically coined and designed in order to be a part of the anger management theory. And that does not require any therapy going outside. It requires the individual to possibly take help from a coach or a behavioral consultant and get those kind of skills to be upgrade and ultimately start practicing to yourself. Even if you did not move to complete behavioral skills, you would still be doing enough if you were to move to the realm of probably doing a lot about medication, something to do with controlling your impulses. Even those would be soft skills, and you would have started already on the right track. A number of books and websites offer information about ways to manage anger, but if learning skills on your own isn't enough to help you stay calm and in control, then one then needs to wake up to the fact that one needs to seek out either a professional mental health counselor or a proper anger management program. So it can start at your individual level, and you may be able to try and do a few things whereby you can actually attempt to control things at your level, upskill yourself, look at a few variables which are available out there, learn from others as to how they might have done it, okay, and practiced it. But if that went in favor of you, nothing like it. If that helped you mitigate causes of anger, helped you come back to a more even tenor much faster, I think you would count yourself lucky. Now, if that didn't help, then obviously one would have to go to a professional counselor or to a proper anger management program. Types of treatment, if you were to go to proper anger management, there would be relaxation techniques, there would be monitored breathing exercises, there would be cognitive restructuring, there would be imagery, there would be prevention and relationship enhancing programs, there would be cognitive behavioral therapy, all of those in multiple forms and multiple shapes, depending upon the kind of propensities and the kind of symptoms that you have obviously demonstrated to the practitioner, and they would then probably use a multiple of these, or a single or two of them, to help you bring back to a level which is most acceptable to all of us. So these are the kind of types of treatments which are available under what is known as anger management. Some self-help techniques, most effective. I feel the human being is a very, very intelligent person. There's no reason for us to be not on top of our senses to start with. Who says that we are not able to control if we put our mind to it? I think in most cases, we are supremely well done in our positions to be able to do things if we put our mind to it. One is, many a times we become garrulous, we lose our sense of brevity, and that leads us to multiple situations where one thing leads to the other thing. It becomes combustible, it leads to anger on the other side as well as on your side. Think before you speak. I think that's very, very important. These are very simple suggestions, but these are suggestions which can actually save you a lifetime of agony. Once you're calm, express your anger. See the dichotomy in the sentence. It says, once you are calm, which means once you have control over your senses and you have control over your locus of control, that's the time when you can, at best, profess to say things in a strong manner, knowing very well that you will not be saying things which will unnecessarily provoke the people on the other side, but you'll probably be, in all likelihood, be presenting facts, okay, with a certain amount of aggression or assertion behind it. Get some exercises. As we just saw, exercises, right sleep, right diet, they always help you in doing the right things. Take some time out for yourself, because it's important to have some me time. Okay, we live our life running after one thing or the other, looking after somebody or the other, but we don't seem to be in love with ourselves. That's very, very important. Please learn to love yourself, because the more you will love yourself, the more you will restrict these kind of ills and evils to actually take over you. Identify possible solutions. You may yourself be intelligent enough to know that if I can feel that anger is coming to the forefront, or I've started feeling uneasy, what should I do? Should I just move away from that place? Should I just clench my fist, start counting 10, just like somebody told me that it really, really works? You have to start identifying possible solutions. Stick with the I statements, in a sense that don't deviate from yourself. Don't try to waylay and throw any kind of innuendos on the other side, because the problem lies with you. So stick with the I statements and make sure that whatever solutions you're talking about relates to you and not to somebody else. Don't hold a grudge. Okay, the life is too short to actually hold a grudge. The more you start practicing this, the more it becomes a part of your normal nature. Use humor to release tension. Sometimes it works wonders. I personally, in my management time, have done it multiple times, have seen some colleagues of mine do it brilliantly. Just when everything seems to be cracking up and people's minds were going to actually blast because of the stress and something which was going wrong, the tensions around the place, somebody would drop some humor, and it would be just, people would curl up, and people would actually be so de-stressed out of that better solutions would come to the forefront. Practice relaxation techniques, which is either meditation, yoga, whichever you have, and know when to seek help. So even after all of these self-help techniques, if you think that no, none of that is working, though I feel 90% of us would be able to actually find our solutions from this list that I've put in here. We can go on and actually add some more, but I thought the top 15 or 20 could actually be had from here. After all this, if nothing works, that's the time when you should think actively about getting help for yourself. Another extremely effective answer to treating anger, developing emotional literacy, which is the second part of it. And this is a simple topic. I'm not going to complicate it by, adding too much to it, except that I just want to point out the fundamentals. What is emotional literacy? Emotional literacy is made up of the ability to understand your emotions, the ability to listen to others and empathize with their emotions, and the ability to express emotions productively. So if you see, it's all about emotions, emotions, and emotions, but it's almost like a study curriculum. You have to know the emotions, you have to understand the emotions, not only on your part, but also on the part of the other person, which is where empathy comes in. And finally, you should be able to express the emotions in a manner so that ultimately it's a win win. To be emotionally literate is to be able to handle emotions in a way that improves your personal power and improves the quality of life around you. So, the more emotionally literate you are, the more strong and in sync with your emotions you are, the more confident you are about the way you behave in front of people, the way you behave when you're on, or the way you actually talk, the way you walk, every single thing completely predictable as per you, that will completely enhance your personal power, and it'll automatically influence the quality of life because you will never be caught on a wrong footing. Emotional literacy improves relationships, creates loving possibilities between people, and facilitates the feeling of community. So, as we see in this chart, very simply, it's perceiving emotions, managing emotions, facilitating thought using emotions, and understanding emotions. So, emotional literacy or intelligence, as we call it, okay, interchangeably sometimes, basically talks about managing emotions, perceiving emotions, facilitating through using of emotions, and that is basically facilitations, and understanding emotions. Teaching emotional literacy, this is where it all becomes difficult. Teaching emotional literacy is the first step to developing empathy in children, and empathy is the key. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone's shoes and understand what they're going through. It's the ability to feel what they are feeling. Why is empathy so important? With ongoing societal issues like bullying and youth mental health concerns, teaching empathy to children is more important than ever before. And I can't but completely resonate with this statement. The kind of aberrations in behavior, the kind of the kind of dysfunctional behaviors that I see around me, whether at an airport, whether at a bus stand, whether at home, whether outside. My God, I mean, sometimes I start feeling what values are the schools, colleges, etc., incorporating these students because they seem to be in a world of their own. They seem to have developed patterns of behavior which just completely defies any kind of value system or ethics that we would have put in place at any point of time. So, understanding empathy and practicing it, very, very important, because otherwise the entire fabric of emotional literacy absolutely gets negated. Why is emotional literacy so difficult? Because we are constantly plugged in. Emotional literacy skills require face to face reciprocal interactions to develop, which means we have to meet, we have to look into each other's eyes. We are ultimately a touch feel economy and society. That is the reason why digitalization, e-commerce, e-services all came in late in our economies and society, because society took its time, though economics was still ready to adapt them, but society took its time to warm up because we are a touch feel society. We love the fact of being surrounded by people. We love the fact that there is flesh and blood which is on display. We like to see each other. We like to actually hug each other. We like to see each other in our flesh and blood. So that is the reason why, and that is the fundamental how empathy and emotional literacy can actually be taught. But in our digital world, unfortunately, where we are constantly engaged in one way interactions via technology, we are simply giving our children less opportunity to engage in meaningful and two-way face-to-face interactions with others. So they are either on Instagram, or they are in Twitter, or they are on something or the other, or the laptop, or something or the other. But at the end of the day, it just cannot compensate for a face to face meeting with another human being. This creates the gap in developing the required skills. My personal anguish today is, at the end of it all, now that we have seen how disturbing anger can be to a personal life and how critical emotional literacy can be to hold that piece together. Because if we learn empathy and if we are able to practice it well within our surroundings and with our near and dear ones and within our society, that's the time when actually even anger will dissipate. Because through sensitization of emotions, by virtue of not just mine but also of the other person, we'll be able to reach out in a manner which will be a win win for all. Having said that, my personal anguish today, our children are in grave danger of falling prey to disproportionate levels of anger very early in their lives today, and I've personally seen this happening all around. Very, very recently in an airport situation, I saw a mother son duo. And the boy, I understand because of the pandemic, there were so many restrictions which had come in place. And I could almost visualize the pre pandemic situation where probably the boy had enough space to run around, move around. It was almost like a playfield for him, juggling between the security channels and all of that. But today, behind that huge mask, behind all the paraphernalia, the poor fellow had to hold an arm throughout the time, despite the fact he tried tugging it, he tried doing everything possible, but it was not to be. And finally, what happened? He started throwing things around. He even took off his shoes and started hitting his mother. Okay, I mean, he was throwing things at his mother, he was throwing things at the other passengers, and there was nobody and nothing that could control his anger. Okay, while he cried, it was crying out of anger. I जिसे कहते हैं ना दिल हिल जाता है. I was absolutely shaken to see that if that could be happening to a 6 or 7 year old, I mean, what kind of a generation are we looking towards? Parenting is at a low ebb because time, effort, and abilities are floundering in the face of a want of living a fast life in fast lanes. We are all so concerned about going up in life, making the most of our opportunities, okay, and making the best of an economic cost, which is time, opportunity, and effort, that we forget that the progeny at home requires my understanding, my facility, my camaraderie much more than anything else in life. Because that is the person who's going to take not only my name forward, but possibly become also a good citizen maker of the place. Current youth, too, do not understand the value of empathy or ELEI that we have spoken about. It's a big pressure environment for them today, and anger, a fool to be used, anger it has become a tool to be used for achieving their ends. Where do we go from here is the question that I ask. And I hope through this little presentation of mine, at least I've been able to bring to you in simple forms, in a structured manner, the very important query of anger, what it can do to us, what it can lead to us, and where it can take us, and the criticality of understanding emotional literacy, understanding how to apply empathy so that we ourselves don't cross the boundaries of anger, keeping the locus of control within ourselves. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, as we are done with the presentation part, now I request you to please have a glass of water because you have been constantly speaking for an hour or so. And after a few seconds and minutes, we will take up few of the questions of our audience. Already we have a few questions.
Okay. Fine. I've actually had my water just now. Thank you, Abhinav.
Okay.
Okay.
Ma'am, one
Tell
question
me.
was there by Bharti Goel that she's asking, when I'm angry, how can I clearly communicate my position without becoming defensive or attacking?
So, one of the few things that I'd like to ask Bharti is when she talks about when I'm angry, is it a recurring phenomena? Is it happening to you regularly? Are you able to map that, whether it's consistently a part of your nature, or is it something which is there at certain points of time, just like it happens to any one of us? Now, if I'm angry just at certain points, like everybody else, then I don't really need to be so badly concerned about how do I clearly communicate my position or not. Sometimes even staying quiet, just bringing silence onto you is stating your position. I practice that very much. I can tell you, Bharti, that when I am at the peak of my temper, when it's almost like I'm seeing red, absolute red, and there are people or things around me which I don't want to at that point of time put my eyes upon, I just simply move away from there and I stop talking for a certain point of time. Over the period of time, by virtue of the fact that I've managed to practice it well, whenever such things have happened, a lot of my close friends, family, and even my peer groups, even my colleagues in the offices, they have come to understand and appreciate that. Okay, so it is something which is a very, very clear strategy of your own, that what would you like to do at that point of time when you feel that yes, things are out of your control, and you may show a side of yourself to people which you don't want to. But if it is just occasional, as I said, please don't be apologetic about it. I think, as I said, if like every other human emotion, anger is pretty much a part of you and me. But if it is a recurring phenomena and you see it happening most of the time, that's the time when you have to sit back and think for yourself. More than being able to clearly communicate your position, I think what you need to start thinking about is how to get rid, what's really happening to you at the background, which is why you're falling prey to these anger pangs, so frequently, so that you're able to sort of develop certain self techniques within yourself and start mitigating those anger pangs from day one itself.
Ma'am, whatever you spoke just now was our next question itself by Pratiksha Yadav. She just commented that whenever I'm angry, I just want to be all alone and don't even talk to a single person. Actually, I do all this as I don't want to hurt the others. Is I'm on the right track of anger management?
Pratiksha, hi. I think it's fantastic. You've developed a style of your own. Who are we to judge whether it's right or wrong? Let me put that
True.
very clear to you. We are individuals and intelligent human beings. We are all intellectual capital sitting here. Please, the first and foremost, one of the things I'd like to tell each one of you is that we are such uniquely brilliant human beings that we have the ability within ourselves to develop therapies, to develop solutions for ourselves. We don't need to be apologetic, number one. We also don't need to always be under pressure of asking us whether we are doing right or wrong. Because do you think everybody else out in the world on the other side are also doing that? If that was the case, then we wouldn't have so many ills around us. We wouldn't have so much of crime around us. Okay, I mean, it almost looks like a free jungle out there today. Look at everybody who's doing every other thing, whether the man in power, whether the man with the money, whether the man on the street. Everybody is yielding their abilities to do what they want in just the way they have to. But having said that, Pratiksha, it's nice you found a way for yourself. It's a very genuine, I appreciate and I really love you for it, that you said something as sensitive as, I want to get away from the place so that I don't hurt the other person. It shows great empathy. This is exactly what I was talking about towards the end. This is what is called emotional literacy. When you have that emotional intelligence within you to balance your emotion with that of the other person and say to yourself that whatever it may be causing me, but I will take care that I don't cause adequate harm to the other person, I think you're absolutely on the right track. Okay? I mean, it's people can take a leaf out of your book, my dear. Thank you.
And ma'am, when I told about this session to one of my friends, he is from a technological background. He directly asked me a question that please pose this question to ma'am. That do you think artificial intelligence and automation is eroding the emotional intelligence today and developing and increasing the anger among the among the youth or people?
Well, Abhinav, this question itself, it cannot be really answered in one part. Okay, I'd like to take it in two parts. One is, and this is to your friend through you. I don't think artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, they are still that big out here. Okay, not as big as in the Western world. Believe you me, even 1 year back, in all the seminars that we used to be going as HR experts and talking on the podiums, we were still talking about internet, AI and IoT and stuff as if it's going to come sometime. Uh, Almost we would predict that it's going to be a few more years. It's all thanks to this pandemic and this COVID-19 and the unique situation that's happened around us, that suddenly, AI only took it upon itself to say that, okay, you want to stop me, I'm not going to be stopped. Machine learning is here to stay. Digitalization is here to stay. You human beings have tried your level best to put me on the back burner, but now I'm going to have a say. So currently, you and me are looking at each other in a virtual world. All the webinars are happening in the virtual world. All conversations and work is happening in a virtual world. And yes, this is probably going to be the direction for tomorrow. So, if we are looking at a way of life which is different from what it used to be earlier, in answer to your friend's question, yes, we are looking at a new phenomena. Now, has it brought about behavioral changes in us, and has it brought about emerging natural patterns in the human being which is not used to be earlier? Of course. Okay, I mean, there are no black and white answers here. Simple proposition: this remote working or work from home, everybody thought that what a cherished option this is going to be, that I can always stay at home and I can always do as I want, and there's nobody to bother me and I can do things at my own will. But please go back and ask some of the ladies, some of the young girls, some of the senior officials who have throughout their life for 25, 30 years been used to sitting across boardrooms, having physical presence of numbers of people, and their entire power used to come from those hordes of people surrounding them. Today, when they are forced to sit at the back of their chair and in a drawing room in their house and conduct a meeting, they don't even sense that power. They don't even feel that their importance is even being appreciated. So that's one part of the syndrome. So that's where their disappointment, their disillusionment as to what's happening has already started to take place. Similarly, the youngsters, now that they are at home, they realize that it's not the best, it's not the ideal paradise that they used to be. The women, for instance, especially the married ones, the kind of abuse, physical and mental abuse, that has gone up in the last 6 months is horrendous. If you see the figures of physical abuse, especially, I mean, just because that poor lady is at home today 24 by 7, not only does she have to manage the homework as well as the housework as well as the office work, but she's even been at the brunt of physical abuse because probably in the conflict of all of that, somebody at home decided, let's give her a whack. Now, just imagine how crude and how ruthless could we be. So yes, I'm not sure about AI and all of that, but yes, this new digital world where remote working has become a reality for us, and slowly and steadily, sooner than enough, technology will become a larger than life presence in our lives. Behavioral patterns will definitely get affected. Anger management will take on a new kind of a role, I feel. Okay. And the new next generation will have a lot of coping to do. They have to learn coping skills much more than what they are used to today. So yeah, we have a challenge ahead of us.
Ma'am, before winding up our session, we'd like to just take two more questions. One from Kashish Goel and one I have my personal question. Putting my personal question first, ma'am, what do you think that what role does the process of socialization play in in developing anger and all those psychological and social issues which we dealt in previous slides, like extreme poverty and etc etc. What role does the process of socialization play in developing anger, according to you?
Hmm. Very interesting question, Avinav, and I think very relevant. I think it was the year 1993 when I wrote an article in in one of the business journals, and that was called "Psychological Isolation of the Workforce." Okay, and I wrote about that with the manufacturing industry in mind. I did not write about it with the services. I was talking. I was, I there was a time I worked in a big, large manufacturing company called Nalco, which was in the aluminium sector, and then when I was part of Bharti, you'll be surprised to know that Bharti was still not this telecom giant at that time. They were just rolling out Airtel in Delhi for the first time. So I was their first member of corporate HR. And at that time, they had two very large manufacturing units. One which was preparing these EPBT telephone sets, the BTEL telephone sets. That was a manufacturing capability. And they had a healthcare division in Daruhera called Bharti Healthcare. Okay, they used to manufacture gelatin capsules. So every time I would visit these, factories, I used to see these workmen spread far across and dedicated to their chips, microchips, or the part of their assembly line or someplace, not lifting even their head so that they will miss something. Okay, and the kind of the pain that used to be there, and ultimately when the bell rang for the shift to come to an end, and that fellow lifted his head or the woman lifted her head, there was no relief. It was actually concerted pain on the mouth. And for a long time after that, the individual would walk up from the seat, I mean, get up from the seat, walk around as if like a little bit of a programmed zombie. because the kind of mental makeup that a person underwent day in and day out in isolation. There were many workers around on the shop floor, but they had their social distancing even at that time, okay, because of the needs of the factories. And at that point of time, the kind of continuous mental makeup that went into that, attending to that one piece of work, it created that isolation, in the mind, which is almost like I am in this alone. So I had written it exactly with the point of view of yours, which is, what does socialization therefore bring in the lives of workforce, where it is a balance between precision work and some bit of fun and play. Okay. And I found a lot of takers for that theory, and a lot of people actually went on to develop the theory even further. um, the second bit of psychological isolation came when the IT industry came in, because niche IT companies, not the kinds of HCL Tech and Infosys and Wipros and TCS, because they hired in thousands. But I worked for a company called Bentley Systems, which was into niche software, and they only had patented product. And we used to hire very few youngsters, blue chip institutes, from blue chip institutes, and at very young age they would be empowered to take on a huge responsibility and be single. They were single contributors, individual contributors. This whole company was based on individual contribution. They did not so much, give enough credence to team working and group working and things like that. That again, I saw that many of these individuals who were doing extremely well from the point of view of taking large packages home, or having very vaunted titles much ahead of their time, but they had aberrations in their behavior. Okay, they were less tolerant. Their threshold level to actually take critical criticism, whether it's positive criticism or negative criticism, they had a very low threshold level. They would spark off, they would be very, very low on social skills when there were groups which were thrown apart. They would not be able to hold conversations together. So there was a lot of uneasiness and insecurity which used to bite them the moment you took them out of their space of isolation. So these things do matter. And your question is very relevant, that socialization has a large role to play in order to balance out the precision that you bring to work with the kind of de-stressing mechanism that you need to build into a workplace. Otherwise, it becomes one extreme, and that does not help the behavioral pattern of anybody. So if you look at it from even an anger syndrome, yes, I saw the anger syndrome, especially in Bentley, where those young Turks, as I used to call them, used to be very short. They used to be on short fuse all the time, because they always wanted things to happen as per them. That's how they were groomed. They were groomed up like that. So that kind of grooming really doesn't help. A certain amount of socialization is always important.
Ma'am, basically we need to change according to the environment, what you are basically suggesting. And last
Yes,
question,
absolutely.
like, yeah, last question of Kashish: is suppressing anger a part of controlling it? Because many of us just suppress it. Ma'am, what I think that in the starting only you told that anger is an active emotion. If you can throw some light on this last
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Anger is an active emotion. Suppressing will never help. Suppressing only makes you a bitter individual. Suppressing brings about manifestations of different kind. For instance, there was a line in the slide where it told you that continuous, persistent anger. If you continuously build it into your system, you'll have headaches, you'll have indigestion, you'll have high blood pressure, heart ailments. All of that develops over a period of time, because it is not as if genetically you're deformed, but it's because you have inculcated some of these behavioral aspects, which has gone into you and has started changing your entire DNA pattern. So suppressing something, whether it's pain, see, when people say that, when somebody very close to you dies in the family, it's an anomaly that I'm sharing. um, there are some people who bottle up their emotions. They don't cry. So especially somebody who's very close, one of the first things that the doctor suggests when they come to see that person is make that person cry, because till such time the person cries, he or she is living in a big make believe world. They're unable to come to terms with the reality and accept what's happened to them, and that creates a lot of anxiety, and it takes away a lot of their age, natural age from them. So the same way, when you have anger bursting out, it's not a good thing. I think Pratiksha, if I remember her name correctly, she said it
Yeah.
nicely that she moved away. I also do the same. That at the heat of the moment, I just turn shut eye, and I try moving away from there. I profess to people, if there are people there and they're not allowing me, they immediately realize it, because I tell them I just like a few moments to myself. And I say it in a tone of voice which makes it very clear to people that Yashi means business.
Yeah.
Abhi chhedo mat. There are ways in which you can actually get that communicated. So if you are sensitive to that, it's better. Please go. Even if it means go shout out at the wall in a washroom, go and do it. But don't suppress a natural emotion, because these are natural active emotions. You've got to learn the skills to deal with them, whether it's pain, whether it's happiness, whether it's anger, whatever it is. But suppressing anything beyond the point of control will always hurt you finally in some way or the other.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us in this session. And moreover, one thing I'd like to say, that the passion with which you spoke and addressed our audience, telling them about the causes of anger and what are the ways through which we can deal and become emotionally intelligent or literate. Because when we talk about literacy, we only talk about the English word literacy. Like
Yeah,
पढ़ लिए लिख लिए तो बहुत कुछ हो गया, लेकिन
बहुत कुछ
developing
हो गया.
emotional literacy is the utmost necessity. Like
Absolutely.
Gandhi ji also said that looking beyond yourself. You talked about empathy and compassion. We
Yes,
limit ourselves to sympathetic part, but we do not look beyond ourselves to and know about others' feeling. That's what actually
sure.
emotional intelligence mean. So, ma'am, thank you so much for enlightening us, and we hope that we get you back on another session on because this topic is so vast that it cannot be discussed in a single session.
Yeah,
All the remedies, all the models, there are so many psychological models. One you discussed that cognitive development therapy, but related to that, there are several such models and therapies. So we hope
yes.
we get you back soon on a session. And thank you so much, man, once again for conducting this.
I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to NYC. Thank you. What a lovely group of people you are. Doing great job. If you're actually sensitizing people on topics such as this, I think you're doing a human service. So thank you, all of you, Manvi and Shmiri, and you yourself. And this was wonderful. This is a topic after my heart. I would always love to come back, and do let me know the feedback from your audience also. Thank you so
Sure,
much.
ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.